BRAC is a good example of what happens when the federal government wants to develop in a city. It's a great example also that there's little that the city council can do to stop the federal government. It's easy to sit here and blame the people on the city council as failing to do their job, but that doesn't prevent it from happening again. I believe that what they should have done is got the state and federal representation involved. We do have state representatives. We have federal representatives. We have the people in the audience right here. We should get the community involved to express our concerns to different agencies, whether it be federal or developers, about what we want as a community, how it will affect us, and that way that they are providing services or amenities or buildings that we need and want, and not things just to fill an empty space.
I do not want to see the BRAC area become Pentagon South. I'm sure most of you agree. These empty buildings or these empty spaces that are either there or about to be there, we need to work very hard so that it just doesn't become another tax loss to the city, just like BRAC. And also, the fact that BRAC was built without a metro stop nearby is still confounding. So yes, Victory Center is a better option, but in general, we need to look at the overall picture here and see how this happened so that it doesn't happen again. And it's just a mere act of more transparency and citizen engagement. But I think that these neighborhoods, people's housing prices, their values have been hurt by BRAC, is what I understand from many residents. And then, of course, the transportation impact. Thank you.
I think it's important to be clear that the city offered two alternatives and didn't choose between the two. They let the federal government choose between the two. And the federal government chose perhaps the lowest price, but the greatest impact to the community. This was an abdication of leadership. That's how BRAC happened. Now, I know people that work at CNA and IDA, those two buildings, and I know why they're moving, because the traffic, the congestion, the quality of their life has been so impacted in that area that they're choosing to vacate one they own and one they lease. In fact, the chief operating officer of the Center for Naval Analysis is quoted in the paper as saying, she had a brief moment of insanity and moved to Alexandria. She's happy to be going back to Arlington. That is business as usual that can't continue. The impact of that BRAC decision is resounding throughout the city. It can't happen again, of course, but it's in concrete, it's looming over our homes, and in fact it did. And the people responsible for that decision need to be held accountable.
For those of you who were sitting on the city council at the time of the decision, let me make clear that one of the reasons I left politics and became a journalist is I get the fact that it's easier to ask the questions than to come up with the solutions. And let me make clear once again that these questions were written already and given to me. I'm going to take this next one to you out of order and ask the second one first, because the second one says to the city council members, what did you fail to understand about a military office building which is a potential terrorist target clogging our roads with 6,400 workers every day? Maybe a little anger there. The former question, still pretty loaded, but perhaps getting more specifically to the issue. Given the anger over the BRAC decision, why should constituents who are upset about it re-elect you when they feel that you were not able to stop the most massive development in West End history? Let me start with, where is it? Yeah, Mr. LeMay.
Thanks. First of all, the city of Alexandria advocated vociferously for Victory Center. That was the choice. It was loud and clear. And DOD answered us and said, you know, we agree with you. In fact, our evaluation panel said that Victory Center was the best site for BRAC. And that's all we ever talked about. We thought we had in the bag in Victory Center. And then they opened the bids. And Mark Center came in $200 million less. Because the property owner at Victory Center jacked up his price because he thought he had it too. and the property owner at Mark Center local. And we got more. In retrospect, I have a regret, and that is that we took the staff advice to do everything in executive session and verbally, and I don't think it would have changed the outcome. But I think we should have been more transparent and open with the citizens of Alexandria about what was going on.
That's my answer, thank you. No one that I know of besides Duke Realty wanted to have DOD come to that site. It was totally inappropriate site, and as I say, no one wanted it. But the problem is that, and what we had been told all along is that it is in the bag, not to worry. That was the advice we got. No member of council was doing the negotiating, incidentally. They only wanted to negotiate to the extent that the government ever negotiates with a local government. But anyway, they wanted to, they were so sure that it was all in the bag. It was going to be Victory Center for the obvious reasons of the 2 metro stations. So what has happened was they opened up the bids, and sure enough, there was a difference between 1.3 billion and 1.1 billion, and of course they felt they had to go with the $200 million figure that was less.
Well, Tim is exactly right, and I think the city did very strongly support the Eisenhower Valley site. We worked very closely with our federal delegation. We made this message very clear. Many of them were actually supporting the Springfield site, as people called it. And they were people who were very senior and who were on the relevant committees who may have had an impact, or could, if anyone could have had an impact on the BRAC process, it was those individuals. And, as Tim said, the bad advice, if there's anything that we can be criticized for, and rightly so, I think if people heard our discussions in open instead of closed session, I think we would be having a different conversation here tonight, because it is unfortunate. And when you look at the BRAC requirements that all these sites were to be judged by, I think very few, if any, of the boxes for this site here would have been checked off.
Thank you. We have a few more. Oh, yeah, there you go, Mr. Wilson, you're right. You got that covered slide.
It's to be honest with you, a little disappointing that Councilman Fannin and Councilwoman Hughes, who serve on the council, have not during their tenure determined the difference between the authority of the federal government and local government. But the fact is, the federal government, as everyone knows, has the ability to preempt local zoning and local taxation. And that is what they did here. It was the wrong site. It was absolutely the wrong site. We said it then, we say it now. That should have been a Victory Center. Everyone said that. But the reality is, as the DOD Inspector General's report showed later, they decided the facility to be at Mark Center on wrong data. And we know it was on wrong data. We knew it at the time, and we know it now. But we can continue to have a discussion about the past where we can move forward. The fact is, we just asked the question, every single one on the panel, nobody had an answer for how we prevent this in the future. Nobody on this desk had an answer for how we prevent this in the future. The answer is moving forward and providing transportation solutions for the site. It's disappointing that some of the folks who are most concerned about BRAC are opposing the transportation solutions for that site, and making sure that in the future we fight any efforts to expand federal government-owned property here in the city.
Thank you. Okay, you all are a great audience, and we have a few more questions. So since I'm sure many of you have earned a bathroom break, you may want to check on the kids or whatever, I'm going to give you a specific question. We're going to have 2 questions on affordable housing, and we're going to end with a question on zoning, and then the candidate's closing comments. So you are a very patient audience, but these are all issues that are important to each of you. So let me start with development, and as I said, you're welcome to take a break, go to the bathroom, and come back, but come back because these are important issues. So for this question on development, we're going to go to Mr. Krause, Mr. Levain, and Ms. Hughes. The city staff tells us, the organizers, that the Beauregard Small Area Plan and BRAC 133 will bring improvements, yet residents are concerned about falling property values and quality of life in the Van Dorn and Beauregard corridors. So the organizer's question to you three, with whom do you agree, the city staff or the residents, and why? Starting with you, Mr. Krause.
Thank you. We need to put the residents' interests in front of these developers. It's about time people start listening to the voters of this city and not big developers and give special favors to outside developers and corporations. I think enough said, except that's enough said. Thank you.
Well, I think that the city did a pretty good job of listening to the citizens in the preparation of the plan. When they went out for their outreach originally to ask, the citizens talked about the need for more open space, for more pedestrian and bicycle access, for having commercial property nearby, having improved transportation options, and all of it is all in there in the plan. You know, there obviously, we could talk about some of the things that could be done better, but I think it's a plan that reflects a lot of the smart growth principles I believe in, by enabling people to walk and take transit to things they need, having that street grid, which serves a lot of positive purposes, by having increased open space. I think it's a plan that over time will wear well, and because it does reflect a lot of the opinions and interests of the citizens.
I'll start by saying this, and it's very difficult to hear me say this, knowing that before I moved to this area, I was a lobbyist for commercial real estate developers. What I have learned in sitting on this council is when people tell you how they feel and what they believe, and they give the documentation and the proof, especially when 60% of the residents in this city above the age of 25 are graduate level educated, you believe them. And the citizens of the west end of Alexandria have taken issue and exception with the Beauregard Small Area Plan. I abstained on the vote on that plan. I understand that there are some needs for affordable housing that were not met to the extent that citizens would have wanted. We started with 697 units, preserved out of the 2,500. I thought I asked the question, isn't it possible to get more? We got it to 800. So for me, the answer would be, who do I side with? I side with my citizens. Just to end on one other thing, Mr. Wilson, you made a misstatement. I do understand the difference between what's decided at the local level versus the federal level. I also understand that there's a letter that went out, and it's on the city's website, and it tells people you would support either of these two. So I want to make sure I clarify that misstatement. And you at the local level have the ability to say what it is that you feel and try to lobby to get the support. Thank you.
Okay.